and get into our first session of the day. We have Isaac Hanson from Figma, building community at work and networking. So, Isaac is an early career recruiter at Figma, the leading platform for collaborative design. In his role, Isaac focuses on attracting and hiring candidates for intern and early career positions. With over 5 years of recruiting experience, Isaac is dedicated to creating inclusive and accessible opportunities for individuals from diverse backgrounds and experiences. Y'all, give it up in the chat and in the emojis for Isaac. Let's hear it. I want to see it. Yeah, yeah. Let me hear it. Let me hear it. Yeah, yeah. All right, take it over, Isaac.
Oh my goodness. First of all, thank you so much for such the warm welcome. When I tell you I get to talk to a lot of students all over the country and go to different talk to different student groups, but there is always something special about talking with the Color Stack community. So I'm super excited to be here with y'all this morning to talk with you all about building community and networking for internships. I know a lot of you all are getting ready to start applying for roles here in the fall, and are going to be ramping up for internships in the following year. So super excited just to share with you all just some strategies for building community and networking during your time as interns. With that, I will just move right into my slides. I'm going to be talking on a couple of different topics today. One being why community matters, talk with you all through a little bit of strategies for building communities and networking, and then, of course, just some things in regards to navigating the workplace culture. Cool. So let's talk about why community matters. Interns often face a steep learning curve. A supportive community provides a safety net that helps you navigate new challenges, learn from others, and gain confidence in your skills. Next, a community centric internship fosters a more engaging and enjoyable experience. Interns who feel a part of the community are more likely to be more motivated and committed to your roles in your internship. And lastly, a strong community helps interns feel like you're a part of something bigger than your individual tasks. Cool. So, in the same vein, let's also talk about networking and why it's crucial. Interns often face a excuse me. One second. Yes. Networking is a very crucial part of your time as interns, as you all are only there for a short amount of time. So while you're there, it's always easy to build your network base while you're in a company than outside of a company. So definitely encourage you all to take the time to build those solid connections while you're there at any said company. And I actually wanted to just share a story in regards to networking and the importance of it. I actually, for a lot of folks that don't know, I didn't take the traditional path of going to a 4 year university. I always tell people I went to the University of Hustle and Grind, but I actually was able to break into tech through a workforce development program called Year Up. And what was cool about that program is that it was this a year long program. 6 months of that was dedicated to learning and development. And then after that, 6 months of that, you were placed at a corporate internship. So during my time in Year Up, I got to be exposed to a lot of different business professionals and a lot of individuals that were able to really help me as I progressed in my career. And one individual in particular was a woman by the name of Rachel Williams. So I got to meet her. And so at the time when I met her, I think she was like the head of DEI over at Yelp. And so I remember this is someone that I met like early on in my experience a year up. But I just remember I took a liking to her. And I just remember thinking like I just wanted to stay in contact with this woman. So throughout that my time in year up, I spent maybe that whole year just generally networking with her, right? So we had an initial I reached out to her after being introduced to her through Europe. I reached out to her afterwards. We had a coffee chat. From a coffee chat that led to me like regularly checking in with her. And things that I would do is like when we would on that coffee date, I took notes afterwards of things that we talked about. So maybe she said her dog was sick, right? So then the next time we talked, I brought up, well, hey, last time we talked, your dog was sick. Like, how are you doing? Right. So really being genuine and really showing that I was like listening and really being genuine in my approach of building that relationship. So when it came time for me to end the year, a program at the end of the year, and I didn't get converted in my internship, I'm now looking for a role. And I remember I reached out to Rachel just saying like, hey, I'm no longer, or I won't be converted at my internship, and I'm now looking for a role. And immediately she had no hesitation in helping me find a role at Yelp where I was hired. And I share that story because had I not done genuine networking, I don't think I would have gotten that role. Right. So I share that to say it's really important while you're, at your internships with these different companies, really build those connections, right? Community matters and as well as networking. So now I'm excited to move into the next portion of my slides where we're going to talk about strategies for building community and networking during your time at internship. Cool. So let's talk about affinity groups. I highly encourage if you all at your internship companies, if they have affinity groups, for you all to join one. So an affinity group is a group of people who share a common interest, identity, or goal, often coming together to support each other and advocate for those shared interests. These groups can form around various aspects such as race, gender, profession, hobbies, or other shared characteristics. And they also often provide a sense of community support and collective action. So I always give the example of in the way that you all have like student groups and different things like that on campus, a lot of companies have those similar type groups and affinity groups. So again, if your company has those, highly encourage you all to join one. Um, and additionally, on that front, affinity groups also offers a space where individuals with similar experiences or backgrounds can connect, share, and support each other while fostering a sense of belonging and community. So, highly encourage you all, if you can, to join an affinity group. Awesome. Next, host an event. Depending on the company you're at, there might be a process in place where interns are allowed to host an event. So see if that's something that your intern company would allow for you to do, right? I think this will be a great opportunity for you as an intern to one get exposure to the company, and even get the opportunity to work cross functionally with other folks that you might not have had the opportunity to do so, right? And when I say host an event, I'm thinking of anything as simple as like an ice cream social, or maybe you just host a random lunch meetup with some of the folks in the office, right? So I think these are great ways for you to one make ensure that we're building community, and also you're building your network, right? So again, if your intern company has something like that in the future, definitely encourage you all to look into hosting an event. This is a huge one when it comes to networking. Quality over quantity. Going back again to when I was in that year up program, one of the things that they made us do that I thought was super important was, of course, create our LinkedIn profiles. And so in that, I remember like as we were like creating our LinkedIn profiles, getting those first couple of LinkedIn connection requests was just like a magical feeling. And so after a while, I remember me and some of the guys that I was in program with, we would just go on LinkedIn. We're just like connecting with anybody, any and everybody, right? In the hopes of just like building that connection base. But I think some of the best advice that I've received from a woman, she was like, you want to keep your LinkedIn community as close knit and as yeah, as close knit as possible, right? Because these are people that you do want to be able to like tap into in the future. So I think really making sure that you're building going for quality connections over quantity is going to be the key. And just some other things that I'll note along that front is one, prioritizing events and gatherings where you are likely to meet people who align with your professional goals and interests. Real huge one, right? So I think, yeah, things like going on Eventbrite, or maybe your company's hosting different events and whatnot, right? Totally encourage you all to do all the networking and go to all the things that you would like to go to, but also like when you're on that front of networking, just making sure that you're just being very intentional about where you're spending the most of your efforts. Next. This actually is one of my, I think it's it of all the points when it comes to networking, I think this second point is probably one of the most important. After meeting someone, follow up with a personalized message or email to reinforce the connection and show genuine interest in maintaining that relationship. And so that actually connects back to the story that I was just talking to you all about with Rachel, right? Had I did not, followed up after that first meeting with her and kept that constant contact with her, when it came time for me to look for a job, when I was fresh out of program, I don't think I wouldn't have been able to get it, right? But like knowing that I had put into work the work to build that relationship with Rachel over that amount of time, when it came time for me to need the role, it was easy, right? So definitely encourage you all after meeting someone, follow up with that personalized email. And actually, another tip that I'll also throw in there too that would work for me. I actually would keep you all might do something different now, but I kept an Excel sheet and I would like type in the individual's name, for example. So I would say Bob so and so. And then in that, like every time we met, I would meet someone. I would put the date when we met, and then I would like to, and that's where I would take my notes at. So again, so when it came time for us to talk, I can just readily have those things available, right? So definitely encourage you all for the follow up to do the follow up. And last point here, again, is really wanted to be intentional. Know what it is that you want to achieve from your networking efforts, and whether that be finding a mentor, learning about a new industry, or just seeking new opportunities, business opportunities, anything like that. Just be very clear about what it is that you want to do, and then share that with said person you're networking with, right? Like nobody wants to feel like their time is being wasted. So I think as much as you can be genuine and authentic up front, that'll really go a long way. Cool. And that actually segues into the next point around being authentic, right? So authenticity fosters trust and stronger connections. So be yourself and show genuine interest in others' experiences and perspectives. I'll also say you want to take a sincere interest in people that you meet. So ask questions about their experiences, their goals, and listen attentively to their responses, right? And again, that feeds back into when you want to follow up, you can then, call these things out. I think one of the things that I used to say in like my networking emails that I would follow up with, I would literally I would pick out those 2 to 3 moments that I wanted to highlight, and I would call the memorable moments. I would say something like, "Hey, Bob, it was so great talking to you today. When we talked, there was these 2 or 3 memorable moments." And again, that just shows that you were listening attentively, right? So I think that's super duper important. Um, and the last thing that I'll note here on being authentic, right, is of course be yourself. Present yourself honestly and genuinely, and avoid putting on a persona that doesn't reflect who you truly are. I always say like there's only one you, right? So you might as well, sell that version of yourself, right? So lead with authenticity. Cool. All righty. So let's talk about navigating workplace culture. I think the first thing, and I would say this, a lot of this is framed in the way of like how I would navigate workplace culture. But I think the first thing that you just have to remember, because I'm not sure for for a lot of you all, but a good amount of you all, this will be maybe your first time at a big company, a big corporation. So I think a lot of times imposter syndrome is on the rise. It's easy to feel like you don't belong, but I think the first thing you have to do is really ground yourself and then knowing that you are enough. Right, you made it to this internship for a reason. I think about it like this, for most of these companies that you all are applying to for internships, they're getting thousands and thousands of applications, right? But yet and still, you were the one selected to be in that role. So at that point, you should know that the company is they are fully on board with you succeeding, right? Like they've now onboarded you to their company. You're now you budgeted to be there for a lot of amount of time. So ground yourself in that, right? So it's like I said, it's easy to get into your head about things, but just ground yourself in knowing that you are enough. Similar theme is dealing with imposter syndrome, and again, this does I feel like play a role in navigating through the workplace culture, right? Because I think again, for a lot of folks, this may be your first big corporate internship, right? And so it's easy to think, am I good enough? Am I this? Am I that? Do I belong here? And the answer to all those questions again is yes, as I was just mentioning. If the company has selected you to be here, they selected you for a reason. But I think if I had to like at least name a tip or a strategy for dealing with imposter syndrome, I think there's a couple of things that one could really do. I think one thing that really helped me when I was an intern is we did this really silly exercise, and I still do it, but it was very helpful. Is like one, you name your imposter. So my imposter's name is Darren. So like sometimes, like if I'm maybe going through a work problem or if I'm dealing with something, and I hear that negative chatter, and I'm like, and I'll literally just like have a conversation with that voice, and you might think I'm crazy, but I'll say like, "Oh, Darren," like, like talk to like that imposter as if it was a person or whatnot. And for me, like it always feels funny because it's like once you put it out there in the air and you say it out loud, it doesn't feel like it loses its sting, right? So I think one, like naming that imposter, and so when those thoughts and those moments come up, you now can just treat it as such, right? Additionally, what we did is like we drew a picture, and so like we just like literally pulled out papers and crayons and drew the worst picture you can think of, and then like I said, that was my imposter. So I now have this additional tool of like I can now like look at my imposter and say like, hey, Darren, not today, right? Like, and so for me, I think that was like super super helpful, right? Just on a personal front for like how do I manage like this imposter syndrome, right? So like learning to talk to it, using that tool of like drawing it out on paper and being able to like now talk to it as if it's a living breathing individual. That was very helpful. But I think also like lean on your community, right? I think what's also very helpful, like you all have this huge color stack community of folks that come from the same backgrounds that understands the struggle, right? So lean on those around you, because I promise you, if you're feeling something, I'm sure there's somebody else in the community that's feeling that same way, and you all are really in a good position to encourage each other and help each other throughout your internship experiences. And also check in with like your mentor, your manager, and different folks at your intern companies, and also to like let them know like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And a lot of times you'll realize that you're not the only one, right? A lot of people that we look up to or think, oh, this individual, they're such a great leader, or they're such a great engineer, or they're a great this. But it's always healthy to when you get to hear someone else's story about like how they overcame imposter syndrome or how they found their way in place in the workplace. So yes, yes. Work life balance. This is also, I think, super duper important. And I think this is also like really important for you all to like understand now as interns, because I feel like how you set the stage for this now is what's going to perpetuate in your career 5, 10, 15 years out. And I think one of the things that we see from interns and just what I've seen historically is that sometimes folks think, okay, if I work extra hard, that's going to equate to me getting a return offer. If I do this, it's going to equate to X. And that doesn't always fare out that way, right? So I think if you can all start to build this muscle now of like prioritizing self, right? And making sure that you are balancing, life in conjunction with work, you're going to be setting yourself up for success, right? Like, I know there was a scenario where we had some interns a few years ago who I think, goodness gracious, were like pulling 12, 13-hour days working at the office to like 9 at night, right? Because they thought that it would equate to a return offer. And that's not the case. So we had to like have a healthy conversation with those interns and remind them like, hey, for a lot of folks, it's your first time in the city you're interning in. Go see it, go explore. And the thing is, and while there are definitely benefits to having that balance in work and life, because if you think about it, when you're able to take that time to refresh, recharge, you're now able to come back to your work in a more with a fresh frame of thought, and you're able to tackle those problems in a different way, right? But when you let things, when there's no balance and now you're just stressed and not prioritizing self, that's also going to show up in the way that you work. It could lead to burnout and a lot of different things. But yeah, so I would say that was the last slide that I wanted to share with you all. So definitely happy to transition into Q&A. But before we do that, I want to just say again, thank you all so much for having me this morning. As I always say, it's something special about talking to the Color Stack community. But yes, with that, I'm happy to take any questions, any oh gosh, I wasn't looking at the chat and I'm just reading through. You guys are hilarious. Talk to the voices. um, so how are we running Q&A? Will someone just come off of mute? Should I just read through the chats? Best networking tips for an introvert. I think I would say LinkedIn is probably a really, really good one. Um, I think just with that because like it allows you to obviously like, you don't have to go through that like awkward face to face interaction with meeting someone new. So I would definitely say LinkedIn, right, and build your muscle and your connections that way. I also think even Google Meet or Zoom, right? Like even though like yes, like that's kind of sort of in person, so to speak, but I think at least like it does remove some of that pressure. It could be like a less tense environment, and I would say and work your way up to that. Yeah. So I think starting with LinkedIn and then maybe move up to like a Google Meet or a Zoom and then go for like in person networking. How do you? Yeah, that is a really good Yazin. That is a really good question. I think the first thing, especially like cold reach outs, right? So I'll use LinkedIn again as an example. So I think that is the best tool to use because what you can do is now go research on that person's LinkedIn, right? So you might look at my LinkedIn and say, "Oh, Isaac, you see I work at Figma, so great." So the first thing that you can do like is in your subject title, like, "Hey, Isaac, I see you work the LinkedIn or Figma." So I think when you're able to like call things out, that shows that you did your research and whatnot. I think that goes a long way because for me, for example, I get hundreds and hundreds of like LinkedIn messages and different things like that. And so when somebody like says like, "Oh, I see that you're an Eagle Scout," most people don't know that about me, but it's on my LinkedIn. But the thing about that is at the very bottom of my LinkedIn. So if you call something like that out about me, that lets me know you were like reading all through my LinkedIn. You went all the way to the bottom so that this is you really want to seem genuine. And then I think also too on the point of just not being or wanting to seem or with not wanting to seem disingenuous. I think when you really name what it is that you're looking for up front is so important. Because then like the person can they can then decide how they want to engage with you at that point, right? Then like, okay, like if you say like, "Hey, Isaac, I'm interested in the roles of Figma." So at least like when I know like exactly what it is that you're looking for, I can decide whether or not like how I want to like network and engage with you from that point as well. So the code email. I always get a little creeped out by it personally, just like especially like if I have no like real if we haven't connected and that information hasn't been shared with you, to me, I always kind of get a little turned off by it. But I'll also say this, like I understand that people are scrappy and we can figure out a company's domain name with, it's usually first initial, last name at company name, right? So okay, got it. But even still, like I'm always kind of like, but again, that's just my own personal sentiment. So I think, yeah, like I tend to prefer like the LinkedIn message or like the LinkedIn request as a way. But again, I think that it just really I think it's that's subjective and it depends on the individual. I'd like to be a person who forms good bonds with other network. You have to be genuine in being genuine and being genuinely curious with someone, right? And I think that's how you do that. And I think to make it more objective, I think learn to ask good questions. So I think like when you're networking with someone and you see someone that you really this is someone you really want to get to know, right? Just or be genuine. So even me as a recruiter, like you could ask me questions like, "What does your day to day look like? What does?" But showing me like that there's that genuine interest. I think that now allows the person to feel comfortable and they say, okay, this person isn't wasting my time. So now I want to engage with you. Now I want to continue this sort of like banter and dialogue. And so again, like I going back with Rachel, right? Like I think that was something that I did, you know, very well when I first got to know her. I would just genuinely ask questions and on any subject, right? And so she was in HR. I would ask her things about her role. And then as the relationship got we built a stronger bond, then I was able to like talk more about like her personal life and get to know her on that level. So I think yeah, being genuinely curious I think is definitely a good thing to practice in scenarios like that where you want to build stronger bonds with people and just asking just good questions. Whew, how do you ensure boundaries in professional relationships? That's a good one. And I guess I'm trying to like, hmm. I think you have to be I think how you ensure them is just like how you move and operate, if that makes sense. Like I think people will only, and again, and only from my perspective, I feel like people will only go as far as you allow them. So, for example, if you show individuals that you're not one that's really into like gossiping, or you're not really into doing those type of things, then like you'll like people won't engage with you in that way. I think people like there are just certain things I just won't do. Like, I will drink at work and I will do things like that, but they're just like I have in my mind, I have a personal rule rather, where I say like I only have like maybe a 2 drink maximum or 3 drink maximum at events and whatnot. But they're like I'm setting my own method of operations in place, right? So that I'm ensuring that these relationships are professional, that I'm ensuring that my professional brand is intact, right? Because your brand and your reputation is all that you have. And so I think like when you're able to move and operate with these boundaries in place and without having to like say, okay, hey, Bob, here's the boundaries for our professional relationship, right? But I think like when you move and operate in that way, I think that's how you're able to, ensure those boundaries. And then I think also if you reach a place and point where those boundaries are crossed, name that, right? Like and I've been in those situations as well, and it's not fun nor is it easy. But when you're able to say like, hey, so and so, this situation happened, this boundary was crossed. Here's how we need to move forward. I think again, that's how you're ensuring that those boundaries are there as well. If you reach out, oh gosh, this is the good one. I think because I don't know, like this is the like, again, this is the what I might call a tricky one as well, just because like recruiters' inboxes like they get flooded. So I think there's definitely I can see the candidate's perspective of like, you want to like reach out, and maybe like the message might have just got like lost in their inbox. Um, but I will say like maybe after that third or fourth outreach, and like they haven't gotten back to you, right? And and you also recognize like you're communicating with them on their real like communicating channels, whether that be means like their email or LinkedIn or anything like that, and you still haven't got anything back. I would probably say by the third or fourth reach out, I might would just kind of let it go at that point, because you just don't. I think because recruiters, we as recruiters, we get hundreds and thousands of messages a day, right? And it's impossible to respond to everyone. And so, you definitely should never take it personal. Um, but I think, yeah, I would say by the third or fourth outreach, that might be like we're starting to like go borderline too much. And especially like looking at the role that you're probably like reaching out to them for, like if you've been reaching out to them over a span of like several months, like the role's probably not even open anymore. So that's also something to factor in as well. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, affinity groups are usually easy. Well, depending on the company. But I would say in a perfect world, affinity groups should be easy to find and join. A lot of times when you're onboarding at your company, you're going through orientation. They'll usually even have they'll plug the different affinity groups. Um, for example, like a lot of companies, they call them like ERGs, employee resource groups, or BRGs, business resource groups. At Figma, we call them communities, right? So they should a lot of times be really easy to find. And for us at Figma, for example, our groups are social and identity based, right? So like identity based meaning like we have a group which is called dark mode. So dark mode is for our black employees and our allies. But then we have another group called like wellness. And so that group is specifically for our employees that are all about wanting to be healthy and live well lifestyles, right? But they're not necessarily, tied by any sort of like identity component, right? So for starting and maintaining an affinity group, I think one, figuring out like is there like a real community or is there like a real need for that group, right? I think that's the biggest one because you might think that there's a need for X thing, right? But if the business or if individuals around you don't deem it as necessary, right, then there's no point. And then I think maintaining an affinity group, like this is a whole nother beast, and I currently like co-lead one. Um, but I think yeah, like things like hosting group events, like those go a long way, right? People want to be in spaces and places where they can build community, socialize, and be around each other people. So events are also a great component when it comes to maintaining an affinity group. So yeah, no, this is a great question. So how do you honestly sometimes it might just even just be you just reach out to that individual and say, "Hey Rachel, I just thought about you. How are you?" Right? Like me personally, like I love when I get those kind of messages from someone and it's just like, "Hey, like there's nothing wrong. I don't need anything. I just thought about you. I just wanted to check in with you." And I think again, that's like where you really start to build the genuine relationships with people. Awesome. Cool. Well, again, thank you all so much. I had so much fun chatting with y'all today. I'm loving all of the love and the comments. So, yes, thank you all so much for having me today.
Yay! Y'all, give it up for Isaac. Let's see all the love in the chat as well as the emojis. Thank you so much. You now you see how much fun I have. Like it's just like we're all talking here. It's a big group
Yes.
chat.
Oh,
So we're gonna ask a giveaway question. And let's see who can get it first. All right. So are y'all ready? All right, let's do it. Okay. What is one strategy to build community and network at work? Okay. One person put every answer possible. Um, did you catch that, Tiffany? Our color stack person in the back. Okay. So who was that? Let's see who won. I mean, they were listening. Affinity groups is correct. Let's see. All right. I'm seeing Aaliyah. Aaliyah. Okay. Yep. Aaliyah got it. Congrats, Aaliyah. The Color Stack team will be reaching out to you next week. Thank you all for listening and tuning in and being amazing. Thank you so much, Isaac. We're going to go ahead and transition into our next session. So shout out to Isaac one more time.
thank you. Bye, everyone.
So now we are going to go ahead and transition into 15 minutes of roundtables in the lounge space. Meet us back at 2:15 to hear from the Wells Fargo team and about the do's and don'ts of interviewing and offer acceptance. All right, y'all, go ahead, talk to each other. I'll see you back at 2:15.